Well, what I noticed when I started going to the different AIDS organizations like GMHC and the People with AIDS Coalition or Body Positive and other groups like that, was if somebody said, you know, I think I'm going to live, everybody in the group said, you're in denial. You're going to die. And so it seemed to me that the reinforcement came from everywhere they turned. The doctors expected them to die. Their loved ones expected them to die. The people in like situations expected them to die.
When you test HIV positive, when you are touched, when you get the positive diagnosis, you're supported by everything and everyone around you to be ill and die. The government gives you welfare and free medical care, and you easily get disability and other programs to help you pay your rent and all that sort of thing. Everyone around you and everything conspires to you being ill and dying, and that this is the path for you, and it's almost a sad, noble path that everyone is very willing to help you walk along as long as you stay on that path and play the role of that victim.
It was easier on the other side.
Knowing that you were going to die?
It was easier knowing I was going to die.
So are you on the other side?
Yeah, I'm on the other side. It was easier over there, man. Because it was real euphoric. And it was real, like, touching the face of, like, God or something like that, coming one with the earth and realizing that everything was going to pass and change. And that's a real euphoric feeling.
There's something attractive about giving up. And I see people ready to do it and doing it all the time.
Let's just talk for a moment about testing. What are your thoughts on someone going out and getting a quote-unquote AIDS test?
Really, when we say it's an AIDS test, that's a misnomer. It's not a test for AIDS at all. And surprisingly, something that it took me a long time to figure out, it's not even a test for HIV. The test is for antibodies that are supposed to be antibodies to HIV, but they're not. It's a test for non-specific antibodies that may or may not have anything to do with HIV.
A very heavily referenced review article on the validity of the HIV tests had more or less concluded that they had never been validated. At the time, I didn't quite realize that one of the implications in this article was that HIV itself had never properly been isolated. It was so difficult to isolate and obtain that that was the reason why the HIV test had never been validated, because to validate a diagnostic test according to the classical decent standards, you need to show that patients who test positive with your antibody kit have got the virus in them, and patients who don't test positive are free of the virus. Broadly, that would be how you would establish its validity. And that had never been done, because you can't find this virus in AIDS patients or in HIV positive patients.
HIV, first of all, nobody's ever found it in a human being. Think of it. The so-called HIV tests do not detect HIV in a person. They detect your antibodies that react to some proteins that are produced at Abbott Laboratory. They do not find HIV in the person. They find a person's functioning immune system that could react against HIV if it were there.
Millions of people take tests that are referred to as HIV tests. However, the idea that there is a laboratory test that can determine whether or not a person is infected with the virus is simply an illusion. The FDA has never approved a test kit that claims to be used for the purpose of diagnosing HIV infection.
It is always possible to determine whether someone's infected with HIV.
So you're able to just draw blood out of a person that you suspect is HIV positive and find HIV virus in their blood?
Yes, even if their HIV RNA is negative, meaning that they don't have any viruses floating in the blood, because the genetic material of the virus when it's in the virus particle is in the form of RNA. But even if someone doesn't have any viruses circulating in their blood, they still have cells infected with HIV. When the nucleic acid of the virus is actually in form of DNA and integrated into the host DNA inside the human cells. And by taking human white blood cells and looking for HIV DNA, we can determine whether the person is actually infected with the viral genetic material, even if they don't have any viruses floating around in the blood. Does that make sense?
The ultimate test that the establishment offers is what's called a co-culture technique, where you take a sample of the individual's blood cells, white blood cells. You cannot find HIV now in this sample. All you have are these blood cells. But then you culture these cells with some special cells that Robert Gallo generated some years ago. You have to throw in some powerful chemicals, phytohemagglutinin or IL-2, for example, to force these cells to do anything. The idea is to wake up the patient cells to start producing RNA, and then this RNA will be coated in a protein, and possibly then there will be viral particles produced in the medium. These viral particles now will go infect the other cells that you added, and then you will amplify by a period of time the replication of these viral particles in the laboratory, what we call in vitro. Now, these particles did not exist in the patient, in the human being, the person that you got the sample from. You created them in the laboratory. And by creating these virus particles in the laboratory, people say they have isolated HIV from a human being. They have not done any such thing.
Nobody was looking at the blood of an AIDS patient and finding it crawling with some new organism and said, hey, this is this virus that we call HIV now.
Is there a test that can definitively tell you if you're infected with virus?
With the virus, sure.
What is that test?
Well, the test is to do the ELISA test, which really demonstrates, and in essence it's a surrogate also because it represents antibody production to the virus. But they have demonstrated the virus. They've had crystalline models of the virus. HIV exists.
I don't recommend people ever getting tested. The reason is I don't know what the tests mean, and I think no one else knows what the tests mean. I've never seen any evidence that what these tests purport to show, they're actually showing, namely the presence of a virus, the presence of an exogenous virus. I really would like to see the electron microscopic data of this, and apparently there is none. There is none where you've done a rigorous isolation protocol.
The test is for antibodies that are supposed to be antibodies to HIV, but they're not. It's a test for non-specific antibodies that may or may not have anything to do with HIV. So it's not at all like we're being told, and it's really, when you think about it, if you're told that testing is responsible, it's a pretty irresponsible test to be taking.
In the gay community, everybody tests all the time. Everybody around me was taking HIV tests. It's a responsible thing to do. It's sort of a gay rite of passage to regularly get tested. You know, and consequently many people around me tested positive.
In essence, AIDS is advanced HIV infection as opposed to early HIV infection. AIDS is when you're ill, and HIV infection without AIDS is when you're
heading towards being ill, but you're not ill.
I always assumed that if you were